today. Last week I had the incredible privilege of being back at the first church I was blessed to pastor. They were having their 125th anniversary and asked me to come and speak, and it was really cool. It was good to be back with. It's fun to see some of the kids that were in my youth group are now showing me their kids, which is really a really weird feeling. But it was really a blessing to go back and see. One of the kids that was in my youth group is now leading worship there. One of them is the youth pastor. One of them I saw was introduced to her little. She's not little. She's in high school, and I said, "What do you want to do?" She said, "I want to be a missionary my whole life and things." And it's really cool just to see God ministering in a really neat way there. You know, we're ending a series this week. Next week, I want you to know that we're going to be talking, it's going to be Father's Day, and I'm going to be doing a message for guys, not just dads, but for guys. I did the same thing for ladies on Mother's Day. So if you are a guy, if you have a guy in your life, if you ever think there will be a guy in your life, this will be an incredible message of encouragement to the dude. So hope you can make sure you come to that. We're ending a series today that we've been doing for several weeks on healing and what's God's view of healing. And today it's kind of going to be dealing with faith. It's going to be kind of a message not only on healing, but really taking a look at the faith in our life. And you're going to see yourself. I'm going to take a look at three characters, and you're going to see yourself in all three of these people, or at least one of these people. You're going to really probably be able to identify with and see that. See, all right, which one of these really am I, and which one do I want to be? And it's going to be cool. But first of all, I want you to think the background of the first person is this, that Peter, James, and John were on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus. And these incredible things were taking place there. I mean, they got to see Jesus transfigured. They got to see Elijah and Moses appear to Jesus, and it was pretty neat. But then, have you ever had those times where you have a real incredible God moment or incredible super moment, and you go down and immediately you're just faced with something crazy? And that's exactly what happens to them. And there's this guy that brings his child to Jesus. Jesus isn't there. He's up on the mountain. And so his disciples try to do something, and nothing happens. Here's the picture. Mark chapter 9 says, when they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder, and they ran to greet him. "What are you arguing about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought my son, who is possessed by a spirit and has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." Now that part about I asked them to do this, to heal him, to drive out a spirit, and they couldn't, I don't get this one. Because what happens is Jesus previously had already given them the power and the authority to do exactly that. Look in Luke chapter 9, verse 1, it says, when Jesus had called the 12 together, he gave them power and authority to drive out all demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. Isn't it weird how oftentimes we are empowered to do more than what we see happening in our life? I mean, God has given us that same power and the same authority that he gave the disciples then. And a lot of times we don't walk in that power. We don't walk in that authority, which it seems like they're not doing there. Now, Matthew tells us, gives us a glimpse of why this isn't taking place, why they're not able to heal this guy. And he says it's because of a lack of faith. Now, Mark, with the same thing, he said it's a lack of prayer. Now, are those contradicting each other? I don't think so at all, because you show me a person who doesn't have much faith, I'll show you a person who's not praying very much. You show me a person who's not praying very much, and I'll show you a person who is struggling in their faith. But on the other hand, you show somebody with faith, and I'll show you somebody who's spending time in prayer. You show me somebody who's spending time in prayer, I'll show you somebody whose faith is increasing. And Beth Moore put it like this. She said, "True prayer, not just mindless, half-hearted petitions, is what digs the well that God wants to fill with faith." I think it's a neat picture. And then in verse 19, it said, this is how Jesus responded. He said, "Oh, unbelieving generation." Doesn't that stink? That's what he says about a lot of us as a generation. Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Now, all three of the gospel accounts that record this have him saying these words. And the word there for faithless is one that said undeserving. It means this, undeserving of trust, unworthy of our faith. And think about that. I mean, that's saying this. We live in a generation that a lot of times we don't have faith in God the way we should. We don't have that it's really, here's what I'm trying to say. That when I don't have faith in God, when something happens and I go immediately to fear instead of faith, or when I'm trusting more in the problem than I am in God, what I'm really saying is this. I'm really saying, God, in this situation, I just really don't believe you're trustworthy. In this situation, I really don't believe you've got what it takes to see me through. And that's what bugs me in this when we talk about that. And he said, as a generation, a lot of times we struggle. Now, I want to do something. I forgot to do this at the very start. We have different mindsets as a Western mindset. And go ahead and throw that up there. Here's kind of a Western worldview. Go ahead and throw that up there. Here's God. And then in our mind, here's nature. And then there's a solid line. Our Western mindset is this. There's God, there's nature. He set laws in motion, but he really doesn't partake in that. He really doesn't take place in nature and really kind of lets nature do its course. Our Western mindset is this, that God kind of started the clock and let it go, and then he kind of walked back on the situation. That's why we're so cynical when we hear about miracles. That's why we're so cynical when it comes to prayer a lot of times. This is, especially in the postmodern, post-Christian world that we live in, especially in the Western hemisphere, this is the mindset of a lot of us. Here's a biblical worldview, and that's this. You've got God, and you've got nature. He set up laws. He set up laws of gravity. He set up laws of thermodynamics and all that. But then there's the dotted line. You know what that means? That means God can come through anytime he wants. That means because there is a real dotted line that God is not, that he is over nature, that he is not just natural, he is supernatural. That means virgins can have babies. That means that he can come to a Red Sea and he can part it. That he can part the Jordan River, that he can make the sun stand still, that he can heal people, that he can bring people from the dead, because he's not just a natural God, he's a supernatural God. And when we understand that, it will change our whole mindset. When we change from a worldview of just a Western worldview to a biblical worldview, it increases our faith, and we expect a whole lot more of this amazing God that intervenes in our life, especially when we ask him to. And he says this, bring the boy to me. So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? Now, why did he ask that question, how long has he been like this? Do you think it was because that made any difference in whether Jesus was able to heal this guy or not? I don't think so. I think he's saying that for their sake, for the people around, the audience that was there, and for us, because he's wanting us to see that this situation is dismal apart from God. This is a bad, bleak situation apart from God. This guy's really sick, and he's been sick for a long time. And here's what the man says. He says, it has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. Luke puts it like this. A spirit seizes him and he suddenly screams. It throws him into convulsions so that he foams at the mouth. It scarcely ever leaves him and it's destroying him. Now I want you to think about this. If you were a parent of this guy, of this young man, can you imagine how tormenting it would be for you watching your child go through this junk? Can you imagine how unbelievably painful it would be to watch your child having all these things happen? Now here's the thing too. He is focusing, this man, and we can relate to this. He's focusing more on the problem and the demonic than he is on God, isn't he? He's focusing on what the devil is doing to his son rather than what God is able to do. And don't we do that? You know, don't we sometimes, we are more focused on our sickness than we are on God's healing power. We are more focused on our lack than we are on God's provision. We're focused more on our bondage and our, the things that are addictions and the things that hold us than we are on God's ability to set us free. We have our focus so many times on the wrong thing. We have it on the problem rather than the God who's bigger than the problem. And look at this. I love this. he says this, the next words, but. I love that. That's a big but, right? It's talking about that one word changes everything. This guy, and this is 3 different examples. We're going to show 3 different sizes of faith. The first one, that we're looking at is a guy with little faith. Then we have a guy with more faith. Then we have a person with a whole lot of faith. The first one, this guy with little faith, I mean, the whole situation is, he says this. He says, here's the problem with my son, but when he says that but, it's opening the door for God to move in his life. He doesn't have much faith at all, but he's at least cracking the door for God to move. And when all we need, I love this, all we need is to open the door for God to move, and he'll move. The Bible says that all we need is a mustard seed sized faith. Jesus said if we have the seed, the size of faith, the size of a mustard seed, that we can say to a mountain, go and be removed and be thrown into the sea, and it'll obey us. I love the fact that we serve a God that we don't even have to go halfway when he meets us. All we have to do is open the door. The prodigal son, all he did is start walking home, and God saw him from a distance and ran to him. He didn't wait for his son to be there or even halfway. I thank God that we serve a God that all he wants is for us to open the door, and he comes in and does some incredible things when we do that. But then he went back to another problem. He said, but if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. I can't believe the guy actually said that. If you can do anything, who's he talking to? He's talking to Jesus Christ, the Son of God, God in human flesh, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And he's saying, I don't know, if you can do anything, try to help out. I mean, doesn't that sound silly when you put it in that way? He's really, between the lines, here is what he's saying. He's saying, my son's been sick for a long time. He's been sick for a long time, and it's a really bad sickness, too. And your disciples, when I asked them to do something, they couldn't do diddly squat. And so really, I don't think you have what it takes, Jesus. I'm not sure you have what it takes. If you can do anything, there's that little faith. If you can do anything, please do something. And isn't this kind of the way that we are, if we're honest? Don't we struggle with the same things that man did? Because our faith can differ based on if we're praying for somebody with a bigger disease in our mind than another one. Isn't it true? I mean, isn't it, let's be honest, isn't it sometimes more of a struggle for faith to pray for somebody with terminal cancer that they say, days to live, weeks to live, than it is for somebody with a headache? I mean, if we're honest, isn't it harder for our faith there? But when you think about it, should it be? Because if we serve a God that is almighty, think of the words. Almighty means almighty. That God can do anything. And one problem is no more greater for God than any other problem. The biggest problem you have in your life is no bigger for God than the smallest problem you have in your life. In fact, you think about even when it comes to healing, Jesus came up, there wasn't one time that Jesus faced a sickness that he couldn't handle. There was even a problem for him. There was no disease that he thought, oh my goodness, what did you say you had? Sorry, I can't help you there. You're gone. You're toast. Sorry. Hasta luego, right? I mean, he doesn't do one of those times, does he? In fact, here's the thing, that there's a time that there was a person with a fever, and he just reached out and touched the person and rebuked the fever. There's a person going by, a funeral procession going by. He just reaches out and touches the casket, and the boy gets up. He used no more effort for this than this. I mean, that no matter what we can think of, it for an almighty God, this is no more difficult than this. How about time? Isn't that the other thing that was really dealing with this? From the time this guy was a little boy, this dad's been struggling with this. This boy's been struggling with this. And a lot of times, isn't that true too? That isn't it easier to pray for somebody than when they've just had the problem than when they've had the problem for decades or years and everything? Isn't it easier to have faith in this situation than in this situation? But again, is God limited by any time or any amount of time that the person's had the sickness? There's times that it's, Peter's mother-in-law, sounds like she just had the sickness that night, boom. But then there's other times that there was a woman with the issue of blood that had that for 12 years. It didn't stop Jesus. There's another man that had been crippled for 18 years. That didn't hinder Jesus. There's another person that was an invalid for 38 years, and it didn't affect Jesus at all. In fact, Jesus' followers, Peter and John, went, and there was a guy that there was an invalid, and they prayed for him. He had been an invalid since the time he was a birth, and he's over 40 years old. Lazarus was in the tomb for 4 days. I'm not talking just dead. I'm talking stinky dead, and that wasn't any problem for Jesus to heal and to set free. I thought look at Jesus' response to the if you can faith. He said, if you can, Jesus said, if you can, everything is possible to them who believe. Jesus took exception to those 3 words, if you can. I wonder if those 3 words still bother Jesus, if we come to him with an if you can faith. Now I want you to think about this. This jumped out at me last night, and this is one of those things. I've read this, I've memorized this passage and things, but I got it for the first time. I got something about it. Jesus could have said this. He could have said, what do you mean if you can? There's not a disease, there's not a sickness, there's not a problem, there's not anything that I can't handle. And that would be absolutely true. But in this, look what he said. He said, there's not a sickness, there's not a problem, there's not anything that you can't handle if you have enough faith in me. He said, everything's possible to those who believe. Who believe in who? Believe in him. So, think of this. He's saying that no matter what the issue is, no matter what the struggle is, just like it's no problem for him, if we have faith in him, it doesn't have to be a problem for us either. There's 2 main struggles that I think we have as we come to people and we come and ask God for prayer or for healing for our life or for a loved one. Here's the first one. The first one is this. Can God heal me? Can God heal my loved one, right? We ask that question, can he? What's the answer here that Jesus is giving to can God heal? And the answer is absolutely. Everything is possible to them who believes. Now I want you to look at this guy's faith, right? Is there a difference between, he comes and says, if you can do anything, and Jesus says, not only can I do anything, I can do everything. Everything is possible. Do you see the difference between anything and everything? Do you see that? Can you imagine what a difference it would be in our faith if we came to God in our faith instead of believing, God, can you do anything, that we come to him and say, God, I believe you can do everything? Do you see the difference in prayer? Do you think that would change our life forever? Do you think it would change how we see God work in our life? If we transform from God, is there anything, to God, there is everything that you can do. And I thought of this too. Look at, immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe, help me in my unbelief. Look at this guy's faith. He does have some faith, doesn't he? He says, I do believe. He's making a declaration of faith saying, Jesus, I believe. In fact, he brought his son to Jesus. That's showing that he has some faith. And he's hanging out there too. Even when things aren't working out the way he's hoping to, he's still there. And that shows me some faith. The dude's got some faith. But then he's honest. And maybe this is something that we can relate to. I can certainly relate to. Got some faith, but God, my faith needs some work. I need more faith, Jesus. But here's what he does. I love this. He goes, Jesus, can you help me with that faith problem I have? He has enough faith in Jesus to help him with the faith problem he has. He has enough faith in Jesus that Jesus can give him the faith he needs to have the faith that's necessary for the situation. I love that. And you may be here today and you say, God, I have some faith, but I don't have the faith I need. The great thing is with God, we can come and say, God, I don't have the faith I need, but I know you have the faith that I need. Can you give me the faith I need? I have enough faith in you that you can give me that. And that's a pretty cool thing when you think that God is ready, willing, and able to do that. So how does Jesus respond to this little demonstration of not so huge faith? When Jesus saw the crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, he said, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. Imagine you're that dad again. And all of a sudden, Jesus does something, and then it looks like the child is dead. I mean, what's going in your mind there? What's going in your heart as you're watching this take place? And this guy's been through a lot. Not only does he see his son that, but he thinks he's dead now. But then all of a sudden, Jesus raises his son. He's not dead. He's completely delivered. He's completely set free. And I want you to see that this guy did not have much faith. But he had all the faith he needed for Jesus to set his son free. That's all the faith he needed was just to open the door and say, if you can. And all he needed was to say, but I know that if I open the door that you can come in. And I know I may not have much faith, but all that faith, that little bit of faith he had was enough for Jesus to come in. And you may come here today and you may say, man, it just seems like I have just that little faith. That's all you need for God to come in and do something great. I'm not saying we should not try to increase our faith. I'm just saying God doesn't need much faith to work with. Another thing is person number 2. This is the other person. He's got some faith. He's got more faith than the other person. And this is a leper. He comes up to him and he says this, a man with leprosy came up and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. I mean, think of this. This guy, a leprosy, again, it was the worst disease you could possibly have in those days. It means you were separated from everything. And he has the first part, right? The first part of the issue, he knows God can heal him. What's his issue? It's the second thing we struggle with. Does God want to heal me? Does God want to heal my loved one? Is that in his heart? And what is Jesus' response? This is the only time we have Jesus on record being asked, do you want to heal, Jesus? Is that something, is it in your heart? Do you love to do that? Is it in the Father's heart? And what is Jesus' response? He touches the guy and he says, I'm willing, be cleansed. And first of all, I love that Jesus touches him. I mean, here's a guy that needed a touch, not only a spiritual touch, but he needed just to feel a human contact again because people had avoided him for years. And I love the fact that Jesus said, I am willing. That answers the question for eternity. Let me ask you the question. Did Jesus say, I am willing just for that man, just for that situation? Or does that apply to us? Is he just as willing today and just as wanting to see his people free today as he did back then? I don't think he'd have it in his word if it was just for that isolated incident. I believe that God's feeling towards that, he's the same yesterday and today and forever. And the same God that was willing to heal is the same God that is willing to heal to today. And here's what happens. Immediately he was cured of his leprosy. The Pharisees believed that if you touched a person with Hodgkin's disease or with leprosy, that you would become clean. You would become soiled. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. But Jesus is saying no. When he touched it, that instead of him becoming soiled, that the leper became cleansed. And the third person is this. Third person is a person of amazing faith. This is one of my favorite people in Scripture. I love this guy. This is Bartimaeus. Now, Bartimaeus was blind. We don't know how long he was blind. We don't know if he was born blind. We don't know that. All we know is that he can't see, and because of that, he is a beggar in the city of Jericho. And he finds out that Jesus is coming by. And I love what he does. He calls out. As he knows Jesus is coming by, he calls out and he goes, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, when he's calling out Son of David, that's a messianic term. What he's saying there is he is calling Jesus the Messiah. He is saying this. He's saying, Jesus, I know who you are. I know you are who you say you are. And I know you can do what you say you can do. And I'm calling out to you. What an incredible thing of faith. I mean, what a faith thing when we reach out to God and we cry out to him and say, God, I know you are who you say you are. And I know you can do what you say you can do. And so the incredible faith. And you know what everybody does? They're telling him to shut up. All the people around him say, shut up. Be quiet, be still. And I want you to know this, that if you believe God is who he says he is and can do what he says he can do, don't be surprised if there's people that poo-poo that. Don't be surprised if there's people that tell you to shut up and stop believing that and everything. We live in a world that the mindset is completely different from that. I've had Christians to tell me that God doesn't do miracles anymore. And I'm like, are you reading the same Bible I'm reading? Are you hearing the testimonies I'm hearing? Has God worked in your life the way he's worked in my life? I know he still does those things. And there's something too, is then Jesus, he cries out even more. I mean, it doesn't stop him. He cries out even louder, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And this time Jesus says, bring him to me. I like that. And now the people that were making fun of him, tell him to shut up, they're now his biggest supporters and saying, hey, he's calling you. Get up, get up, get up. And I love this. Picture this. What would you do if you were this man? If you were Bartimaeus, and all of a sudden they said, Jesus is asking for you. And it says he threw off his jacket and threw it to the ground. And then I can't picture him just going like this. I picture him running towards whatever sound Jesus is making. And I believe there's nothing in his way. And can you imagine what's going on in your heart? I mean, can you imagine how fast his heart is beating? Can you imagine how sweaty his palms are? Can you imagine the adrenaline that's pumping through his eyes? I got goosebumps just talking about this. And just, can you imagine this thought? And then Jesus asked him what appears to be one of the weirdest questions ever. Here's the question that he asks. What do you want me to do for you? I mean, what do you think? You know, fix my slinky, Jesus. Could you do that? I'm having trouble with it. Can you fix me supper tonight? No, I've got it. Can you heal my eyes? Can you make it? And he said, Jesus, I want to see. And he says, then it's going to be done to you according to that incredible amount of faith you have. You're going to see an answer to that. And I love the picture. And I wonder which one represents our faith the most? Which one represents your faith the most? Here's the beautiful thing that blows me away. Jesus answered every one of them. One thing these three had in common, they all came to Jesus, which is the right thing. And they all were persistent. You ever notice that? These are three people who would not give up. And these are people that first guy, he had every reason. You know, when nothing's working out, he had every reason to say, enough of this, I'm out of here, right? We gone, right? He could have done that. He didn't. He stayed the course. You see the same thing with the leper. He's going, I believe and I'm not moving until you do something. You have Bartimaeus. He's told to shut up, and he yells even louder. And here's the thing, too, that I believe is maybe it's time that we have less confidence in ourselves and we have more God confidence. You know what I mean? Maybe it's more that we take our eyes off the problem and the situation and everything Satan's doing and all the torment and all the everything. And we put our eyes on what God's doing in our life. And I need to hear that right now. And we need to put our eyes on the God that's bigger than our problem, the God that's bigger than the sickness, the God that's bigger than our lack, the God that's bigger than whatever. And we take our eyes from one to the other. Maybe it's the time that we need to stop believing that God can just ask God, can you do anything? And God, and come with faith and say, God, I know you can do everything. And here's the thing that I notice, no matter what size of faith we come to God with, no matter what the container, he's going to fill that container. If we come to him with a little, hey, he's going to fill that. He is faithful to fulfill it. We come to him with a garbage bag full, he's going to fulfill that too, whatever we come with. And if we could bow our head and close our eyes, I really believe this last night that God was saying something for us today, and that's this. Jesus asked Bartimaeus to be specific. What is it you want? What can I do for you? And sometimes we always just go to God and we just say, God, what do you want me to do for you? And I think God's giving us an incredible invitation today at Crossroads. And those who are hearing this online, I think God's giving you the invitation to say, what do you want? What do you want me to do for you? What is it you want? What is it you need? Say it. Be specific. And Jesus knew what it was that Bartimaeus needed. There was something about expressing it. There was something about saying it. That sometimes in the heart of a parent, when the child says it, that it does something. So I just want to give you the moment. If Jesus were here today and saying, my precious child, what can I do for you? What would you say? What's the biggest issue on your heart? What's the impossible situation? I really believe I'm supposed to say this right now. What's the situation you gave up years ago because you were tired of praying? say it. Let him know. Maybe several things. And God, I ask that you help us right now to move from fear to faith, to move from doubt to belief. God, the prayer in my life is increase my faith, God. I want you to increase my faith. God, I believe. Help me in my unbelief. Help us as a church to believe in you more. Help us as families. Help us as individuals. God, I'm tired of saying if you can do anything. And I want to go immediately every time to, God, you can do everything. And I trust and believe in you. So I pray for your people right now. In Jesus' name. And if we could stand, and I want you to know the altar's open. There's people here that want to pray for you. They're excited to pray for you. And maybe there's something, an issue that you want to come up and say, God, you ask me what I want. I'm telling you. Maybe you're here today and you're saying, God, I just want more faith. I come to you and I'm coming to the altar and saying, God, increase my faith. I want to go from this faith to a Bartimaeus faith. The altar's open.